Are you a good girl or a bad girl? Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. So we've all heard of these stereotypes. There's the virgin whore, there's the good girl, bad girl, and women get labeled as one of these two categories, usually very young and early on in life. It can be from, family dynamics, it can be from social situations, religious situations, unfortunately trauma, things like that can really force women to view themselves, and society views women in general as being, either good or bad. There's the two extremes and nothing else. I could go on all day about the way that we view everything in extremes in our society, but this video will just talk about this particular instance. Women put themselves into these categories, and they put other women into these categories as well, as to what girl is good and what girl is bad. What girl is essentially, virginal and untouched, and what girl is very sexually free. And you've got to be one of the two extremes, or else you're just not a person, right? The thing is, when we're talking about feminine cord beings, and I talk a lot about masculine and feminine energies in other videos, so if you want to know what I mean by that, you can watch some of my other videos. But if you were a feminine cord being, like you were a being whose natural core energy is feminine, which the majority of women are. So I'm going to refer to women in this particular situation. Feminine energy is so vast. There are so many different archetypes to it. There's so many different flavors of it. It is so, so vast. And as a feminine being, I believe that a woman contains all of these different energies. Every single aspect of it, to the virginal maiden, to the sacred slut, to like the dark Kali destroyer of egos. Like, I believe that is in all women. Like, we contain all those energies. And when we put a woman into a specific little box of like, this is the archetype that you are, we are vastly limiting them. Unbelievably limiting them. If you put someone in this little box and you say you can only be this, people don't tap into their full power. And again, I think this goes for men and women. They don't tap into their full power. They're easier to control, really. I mean, and so I believe that this is part of a bigger plan that is not just men against women or something like that. Limiting women in this way not only massively hurts women because they never get to fully explore all different aspects of themselves, it hurts men as well, because in reality, in the same way that I talked about in my alpha beta male stereotypes, in that situation, a woman is never going to be fully satisfied with a man who is either the extreme macho jerk, because he's going to be completely unfeeling, he's going to be cruel and mean to her most likely, and she's never going to be satisfied with the weak passive male, because in reality he's never going to have that strong masculine leadership that's going to make her feel secure enough to be able to be led into her feminine energy. So that neither of those two extremes is going to be satisfying to a woman. So she's always going to feel like she needs more. It's going to keep relationships very unstable, because she's always going to be like, okay, well now I have a nice guy, well now I have to go off and find a bad boy, and now it's like, well now I have the bad boy, well okay, I don't really like what's happening with him, so I need to go out and find a nice guy again. And it keeps relationships totally unstable. In that same way, this good girl, bad girl phenomenon, it keeps relationships unstable in the same way, because if you think about it, like, there's a lot of men out there who are going to marry a good girl, which usually is someone who is embodying either that the innocent maiden energy, or that mothering energy, that warm nurturing energy. And oftentimes men will marry women like that because they are, desiring somebody who's going to be loving and nurturing to them, to their children, or someone who is sort of innocent and sweet and, virginal, so he feels like, well, she's not going to be running around with, every guy in town. But then if that's all she is, like, she can't tap into that sexual energy, she can't tap into her sacred slut energy, like she can't actually tap into that aspect of herself, he's gonna always feel like he's missing out. And very often those are the men who end up going off and having affairs or going to strip clubs or whatever, because then they get to find women who are solely embodied. They get to go off with the bad girl, so to speak, because those women are solely embodied. I mean, that's why men go to strip clubs or prostitutes, is because that's literally all that, I'm not saying that that's all that women I'm not criticizing sex workers, but I'm saying that if you are a sex worker, what you are bringing to your job is solely your sex work, right? So it's solely that sexuality, it's solely that sexual energy. And that's what usually men that are going to see women like this are seeking, because they don't have that at home, because they have the good girl, right? And it becomes this energy of like, men aren't satisfied in the same way that women aren't satisfied with the extremes of men. Men aren't satisfied with the extremes of women, because it's like, okay, I have this good girl that I feel like is, you know, loyal, a good mother, things like that, but I'm not feeling that sexual energy that I get from a woman who's fully embodied in her sexuality as well. So he ends up seeking that somewhere else. I'm not justifying infidelity at all. I'm just saying that that's what the energy is. It's that craving something that the person is missing. It's like, it's happening with both men and women, that when we put anybody into this small little box and small little category, first of all, it limits themselves and hurts themselves, because they never get to experience the fullness of everything that they are. But it also hurts their partner as well, you know, and regardless of gender, because their partner is going to always feel like there's something lacking in this relationship, when in reality, most of us have the ability to tap into all the different archetypes. We haven't been taught to, and many of us haven't been encouraged to. So in reality, I know that there's a lot of women who think that this good girl, bad girl thing is just men trying to control us, and it could be to some extent some men trying to create this in order to control women. But I do believe that also men have been being controlled the same way, whether by men or women. Who, I don't know who's actually doing the controlling. There's people out there who are way deeper into the conspiracy theories than I am that could probably tell you more about who's pulling the puppet strings. But I also really don't love the idea of like, just let's blame men or let's blame women or whatever. And I think we end up ignoring the people who are actually doing the controlling, but that's for another video. So that's how that stuff affects relationships. I do also think that this stuff affects the individual themselves. And in this particular case, talking about women and their extreme stereotypes, I think it becomes part of their identity. Being a good girl becomes part of their identity. Being a bad girl becomes part of their identity. And it can often lead to making decisions and choices that aren't necessarily aligned with our truth. There's a lot of women who go into the bad girl category because they don't like the shame that they get from being the good girl. It's like, well, I can't just be virginal, so I have to be a bad girl. So they reject the good girl aspect. And the good girls maybe don't want to sleep around with a lot of people. They don't want to be promiscuous. So they reject everything that is the bad girl. So very often the good girls can completely shut down any kind of connection to their sexuality. They become defined as either being virginal, or they become defined as maybe defined by their career, or defined by being a mother or mothering energy or something like that. They become defined as other things, and all those things are good. I mean, none of those things are bad. It's just they never are able to tap into that sexuality. They can very often become very suppressed. And again, I'm not saying that these women need to go out and sleep with everybody in town, but they aren't able to connect with the sexual energy because, oh, well, if I do anything too sexual, well, then I'm not the good girl anymore. And they have to hang on to that good girl persona of like, okay, well, good girls don't do that. And in some cases, they may be very healthy, natural sexual expressions, but they can very often shut themselves down to, you know, even having a healthy sex life with their spouse or something, because it's like, well, that's not what good girls do. And it becomes this very limiting situation. They even feel internal shame and shame themselves for experiencing anything that isn't in that good girl category. And I mean, look, there's been a lot of studies about women who, when they completely disassociate with their sexuality, it leads to a lot of physical health problems, mental health problems, because women are shutting down a huge part of themselves. Women are meant to be sensual beings, are meant to be sexual beings, and that does not mean that they need to sleep around with everybody. I'm not implying that at all. But being able to connect with your own sexuality, your own joy, your own pleasure, that is feminine energy. And shutting those parts of yourself down as a feminine being is hugely detrimental. So it's actually dangerous to your health in that sense. So on the flip side, if you categorize yourself as being the bad girl, you then reject everything that is the good girl. You reject anything that might associate you with the good girl, because no, you're a bad girl. You're not that. Like, you're not the good girl. It's something I don't think we talk about enough in our society. Very often, if women now define themselves as being, you know, like they're owning their slut, or their promiscuity defines them in a certain way. Because there's a lot of women out there for whom their promiscuity is defining who they are. They're part of their identity. And I'm not saying that that's something to be ashamed of, and I actually touch on this a little bit in my Instagram model lessons I learned video. It's not something to be ashamed of, but I think if you just define yourself as that, for one thing, you're limiting yourself, right? Because you're not going to embrace other aspects of yourself that are probably amazing. I mean, I don't care how much you think your sexuality defines you. There are other aspects to you and your personality. In the same way that if you're a woman who defines yourself as something other than your sexuality, I guarantee you your sexuality is there, it's in you. Whereas if you're like the bad girl and you only define yourself by your sexuality, I guarantee you you're missing out, because there's other aspects of your personality that are just waiting for you to tap into them. But very often, and I've seen this with women, when they define themselves as being promiscuous, it becomes more difficult for them to say no. And it's interesting how you would think that when women put themselves in that category, it would make them more in touch with their sexuality. But oftentimes it doesn't, because it means that if they say no to anything, or they do set boundaries, or they do say something is not right for them or uncomfortable for them, they're almost ashamed to admit that, right? It's like, well, I can't say that this isn't a part of my sexuality I'm not comfortable with, or I can't say no to this, or I can't set a boundary in this situation, because their sexuality defines them. And if they did say no to something that maybe didn't feel right to them, or they did maybe not go into a sexual situation that just what they weren't connected to, well, oh my God, what if that makes me one of the good girls? Like, what if that makes me into a prude? Like, I can't do that. So they have to be up for anything. So it just keeps upping the ante as far as sexuality, and oftentimes can lead a woman into going a lot farther than maybe she even really wants to go. And in the same way that women who are shut down to their sexuality, it can cause health problems. Hopefully most of us are familiar now with the fact that women who are, or anyone really, who is extremely promiscuous and doesn't have any boundaries when it comes to their sexuality, they're putting themselves at some pretty serious health risks as well. I mean, not just STDs, but pregnancy, you know, and just putting themselves in physical harm, because in reality, as much as we want to pretend that men and women are the same, women are always more vulnerable in sexual situations. It's reality. And not even just sexual situations. Women are more vulnerable in everyday life. Like, that's just something we have to accept. But if you're a woman who is solely defined by your promiscuity, you're gonna be more likely to put yourself in situations that may not be safe. And I'm not saying that everybody does that, but when you are embodying one of these two extremes, it makes it so much more difficult for you to be able to, you know, either set a boundary if you're the bad girl, or to maybe open yourself up to a new enjoyable experience if you're the good girl. Like, it's so limiting, and it's actually dangerous to have these extreme stereotypes. And I fully believe that, like, all women can connect to their sexuality. It does not mean that they have to sleep around. Should I say this? I don't know if I should say this. I feel like this next thing is probably going to get me a lot of hate, but I'm just going to say it. Women's biology, I think I've already pissed off a bunch of people just saying that, but anyway, I'm just going to say it. Women's biology designs us so that our body chemically releases a hormone that causes us to attach after sex. That's the reason that you get the stereotype. I did stand-up comedy for years, so I've heard this hack joke so many times about the woman that, like, after sex, the guy wants to go to sleep and the woman has like 100 million questions that she wants to ask the guy about their relationship and where things are going and blah, blah, blah. It's because literally her body is like, it's the same chemical that gets released when a woman gives birth, okay? It's an intense hormone that gets released that causes a woman to want to attach. It's going to happen. Now, are there women out there where that doesn't happen, or maybe it doesn't happen as strongly? Of course, but the vast majority of women, that happens. I'm gonna say, for one, I know a lot of women, particularly like my generation, the younger generation, a lot of women are like mad at themselves and think there is something wrong with them when that happens. It's like, oh, why can't I just have sex without feeling? Why can't I just have sex and not care? Your body is not designed for that. Now look, I'm not shaming anybody for sexual expression. I'm not shaming anybody for making a choice with how they want to express their sexuality. It is your choice, 100%. I believe in personal freedom, but the longer we deny that women are not biologically designed to be promiscuous with a bunch of different people, because our bodies are literally designed to attach. Because again, if it turns out that we're pregnant, biology is like, hey, we're gonna need a man to help us take care of this kid. Like that's what our bodies are designed for. And I find it really interesting how we spend so much time using biology to justify what men do, as far as men being like, well, I'm just biologically designed to want to spread my seed. That's why I've had sex with every woman in the neighborhood. But yet we ignore a woman's biology, literally her biology, which is designing her to attach to the man that she is physical with. If you want to look past biology, you want to look at it energetically, for most women, it is very difficult, if not impossible, for a woman to separate her heart chakra from her sacral chakra, from her genital area, from her sexual energy. Very, very difficult. For men, it's not the same. For men, they're usually able to disconnect from that. I feel like in this effort to make men and women be the same, we are supporting men's biology of like, well, he's just designed to want to sleep with a bunch of women, and he's just designed to fool around. He's just designed to be able to have sex and not care. And we're ignoring women's natural biology that doesn't work with us. You know what I mean? Like, we're not designed to be able to just not care and to be able to just completely disconnect. And are there women doing that? Yes. And I've had men argue with me about this, and I've had women argue with me about this. That like, well, that's not all women. It's like, okay, yes, I realize that there are some women out there who can be just as promiscuous as men. They don't connect to their heart. They don't have a biological connection and whatever, and that happens. It's not the majority of women. So if you're a woman and you don't have these natural biological attachments, and you know, you don't have a heart connection in sexual activity, you don't have the hormone release so that you feel an attachment, there's nothing wrong with you. I'm not saying that there's anything bad. I'm not saying that you're like an awful person or anything. There's no shame, there's no judgment. However, that is not the norm. That is not the common thing. And as far as biology goes, it's not really something that should be a goal necessarily. It's how women were designed. So I think accepting that, and I'm gonna get on a personal level for me, accepting the idea that I know I'm gonna get emotionally attached to somebody if I get physical, was such a freeing thing. It was so freeing for me to have that realization and be like, you know what? I'm not gonna get physical with somebody that I don't feel safe getting an emotional attachment to, and setting that boundary. It was incredibly freeing for me, because there is a pressure in this society. I felt, I know from my generation, there was the whole Sex in the City, you know, let's have sex without feeling, let's have sex like a man. That's not in a woman's natural biology. It's just not. And again, if you are a woman who is able to do that and you feel like that's your truth, no shame on that. But I also don't think that we should be teaching women that that's how they're supposed to be, because that's not natural. It's not a woman's natural biology. I didn't expect to go on that rant, but I guess I was just driven to in this discussion. This is not me trying to put any kind of like religious or moral push on people. I believe that women can connect to their sexuality. I believe women should connect to their sexuality. I don't believe that they need to sleep around with a bunch of men to do it. I don't even think that they need a man to do it. I mean, again, this could relate to, you know, same-sex relationships as well. This can relate to just exploring yourself sexually, connecting to your sexual energy, your sensual energy, the natural part of being a feminine being. No matter who you are, how you think you're defined, like, you were allowed to have boundaries. You were allowed to have standards and requirements. You were allowed to say no when something doesn't feel safe. It is so important, and I think I've said this in a lot of other videos, but I just think it's so important to emphasize that feminine energy thrives in safety. So if something doesn't feel safe to you, regardless of what your, you know, how you define yourself or how society defines you, or even who you were in your past, If you were a bad girl in your past, it doesn't mean that you can't decide now, okay, nope, you know what, now I'm gonna have, I'm gonna set boundaries. I'm gonna decide, when and where I make my decisions sexually. And if you're already doing that, great. I do think that there are a lot of women who define themselves a certain way who don't do that. And I want to make sure that women know they can. In the same way that I think that the good girls should know, hey, you know what? I can explore myself sexually. I can explore the sexual part of me. Doesn't mean that I need to be promiscuous. It doesn't mean, I mean, look, I'm not somebody who promotes promiscuity. I believe people can choose to do what they want to do. I believe in personal freedom, and consenting adults can make their own decisions. I don't personally believe that promiscuity is necessarily a healthy way. I think it's very often a distraction. It's a way that people often use sex to avoid intimacy as opposed to using it to create intimacy, which is more what I view sex as. And I could do a whole other video on the way that we view sex and sexuality in our society and how twisted we've made it in our society. That's for like a whole other video. But really the point of this video was just that I want women to understand that you contain all the different flavors of feminine energy. You contain all the different archetypes. The more that you define yourself, or you let society or family or religion or other people define who you are, the less free you are. And to fully embody yourself is to fully embody all the different aspects of yourself and love all the different aspects of yourself, the good parts and the parts that you've deemed to be not so good, from either end of the spectrum. So if you want to connect to your feminine energy and all the different archetypes and all the different aspects of it, I have a great beginner course. It is called Feminine Radiance. The details will be in the description box below if you want to check it out. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I had a lot of thoughts and I kind of went off on some tangents I wasn't expecting to, but I just think this is a really important topic, and it's just talking about feminine energy and helping women heal their feminine energy is just a really, it's something I'm really passionate about. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you have any other topic suggestions that you would like me to talk about, let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section below. I love to hear from you. I love your suggestions. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a big thumbs up and be sure you subscribe to my channel. You can follow me on all my social media channels. The links will be in the description box below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.